Welcome to this video tutorial. In this video, we will talk about exporting animations from DAZ Studio to Unity. There are several ways to create animations within DAZ Studio. There is a standard animation tool, and you have a timeline for animations. There is a puppeteer, and there's all different types of tools within DAZ Studio that you can use. I will use Animate as an example here of how to actually apply the animations to the character in DAZ Studio, and for most of the time we will focus on the export process to Unity and how to use the animations in Unity. So very briefly, an intro to animations in DAZ Studio. Animate is an external tool, you can purchase it. It uses something called AniBlocks that are small blocks, basically individual animations that you can combine and blend together, just like you would have animations in Unity as well. Be mindful that if you purchase any content, any animations for DAZ Studio, that you need to be aware of the different generations of characters that you use them for. So animations created for Genesis 2 models will not work with Genesis 3 models unless you look at conversion tools. There is actually a conversion tool here. I have not tried it, so no guarantees that this will work, but the different generations of characters have different character rigs, bone rigs with a different number of bones. So applying Genesis 2 animations to Genesis 3 is not straightforward. Just be mindful of that if you purchase any content. The other thing that you will see when you look at the DAZ 3D shop is a lot of poses. Poses are not animations, they're really just still poses. So it's basically like, you could think of it as an animation with just one keyframe, just one frame where the character is in a static position. So you could use those poses that you can easily buy also in the store, maybe as a starting point for your own animation, but those are not animations per se, just as a warning. All right, let's head into DAZ Studio. And here you can see the character that we used in previous tutorials. This is a Genesis 2 character. And I have Animate 2 installed. If you purchased it and it doesn't show up, first of all, you can simply check up here in the window panes, and you can open the window for Animate. And if that doesn't even show up, then you might have to check whether you installed and registered Animate 2. You can see here under Help about installed plugins, you see all the different plugins that you can use. And if those lights here are not green, you might actually have to put in the license key. So here you can see Animate 2, green light, it's all good to go. All right. Now, how can I apply animations? You can see down here, there's Genesis 2 male. This is the name of our character. And you have something like a timeline here. There's also pre-existing animations that come with Animate 2. And you can simply select, for example, walks. And I think that's a good example. We will just use the walking animations. We have start, stop, forward cycle, corner left, and corner right. And those are often used in games or in applications, so we will just use those as an example. You can already see when I hover over it, the character starts walking. You can also see that the feet are bent up, so we would actually have to fix those animations. They don't work with the character and with the shoes that the character is wearing, but we don't worry about this too much in this tutorial. There is tutorials out there for the actual animation process, so we will not worry about this right now. What we can do though is drag and drop this any block of start walking up here into our animate timeline. And you can see this marker here, this is the end of the animation. So we can see this will roughly last for just under 2 seconds. We can look at it in more detail. And we can also create subtracks here if we want to blend animations, but again, this is for another tutorial. All right, now in order to actually apply this animation to this character, we have to transfer this any block to the proper animation tool, the timeline here for DAZ Studio. So we right-click anywhere here in this gray area and select Bake to Studio Keyframes. And it tells us that this is what we want to do. Yes. And now we can move over to the timeline here. And we can now also look at all the different frames here. We can see there's 51 frames that were created that animate our character. Again, he looks a little bit stiff, but we don't worry about that. What's next is we can export this character. And this is the same process as we would usually export the character to Unity. So we simply export it into our project. and we call it DAZ Generation 2 Animations as an FBX file. This is important. You save. Output options, FBX 2014 binary. And here, make sure that you tick animations. This is the important part. We have morphs selected as well, figures, and animations. If you animate something like cameras, lights, and so on, you can do this as well. Be mindful though that lights and cameras right now don't export and show up in Unity. They're simply empty game objects. They have no function there. So this is usually not useful. But animations is what we want. And we click accept. Now, before we move over to Unity and show you how to use the animation there, I would like to also export a character with multiple animations so that we can actually see how to transfer more than one animation at a time. Let's go back over here to the animate window, and let's also drag the forward cycle right here into that timeline after the start animation. And we also have to move our end of the animation to back here. And you can see now the character actually keeps walking after the initial start. Now sometimes this will actually not update, and you could drag this slider here and you would not see any animation for the forward cycle. If that happens, you simply need to click on the Genesis 2 mail here, lock the track, and click on it again. It basically just, I think it's just a small glitch that sometimes happens. But that should actually do the trick. And now we have two animations here that are just one after the other, and that's good enough for now. What we have to do now is we have to back to Studio keyframes again. Let's have a look here. And all of a sudden we have more keyframes here, total of 87, 0 to 87, so 88 in total actually. And we can see this is the full animation here. That also includes the walking cycle. Perfect. Now let's re-export that again as a, maybe that's just as a different character. Let's call it animations 2 so that we can see them side by side and see what the difference is. Again, we'll leave everything checked. So animations, morphs, figures. We don't really deal with morphs right now, but we can still keep them. And over here, the usual settings that we used in previous tutorials. Accept. And the character now will export with two animations attached. All right, let's move over to Unity and wait for the import. Okay, our characters have imported in Unity, and we can see them here, animations 1 and 2. We'll just drag them into the scene. They look exactly the same. Now, they don't look perfect yet because we haven't set up any of the materials. We did this with the other character, the exact same character, so you can look back at the other tutorials and see how that was done. They already come with an animator here. That will be important in a little bit. And the first thing we can do is just go to the FBX file here in your project and change the rig, the animation type, from generic to humanoid. That is required. Once that is done, let's have a look at the two different characters and see what the difference is. You can see the files look exactly the same. We have an avatar for both of them, and we have one animation called animation for each of them. Now, the only difference here is that this animation file for the first one contains only our start animation, and here the same file contains both the start and the walk cycle. So it's really just about the length of the animation, and you can pack as many animations in this animation file as you want, and it is our job now in Unity to tease them apart again so we can use them individually. So in other words, we don't even actually need this first character here. Instead, we will just keep working with the second one. It was really just to show you that the only difference here is just this animation file, which is important for us. All right, so let's click on the FBX file again. Let's get over to animations. Now, the first thing is that if you don't see this animation file here in Unity, then it is probably because this import animation checkbox is not ticked. So if that's the case, just go over to animations here, tick import animations and apply. And since we exported the character with animations, the file here, animation file, should show up. All right, what's next? First of all, usually there's a button called clamp, and you can actually clamp the range of the animation. But more importantly here, what we have is a preview down here. We can see the first part is the start, and then there's the walk cycle. all cool. Looks good. We don't worry about all the looping and so on too much right now. That is actually, there's documentation in Unity that describes this really well. What's important here is that we can see that there's 0 to 86 frames of the animation. Now, for us, it's important that we tease those apart into two different animations that we have. So actually, let's go back over into DAZ, and let's check where exactly our animations end. The first one ends. So you can see that if I change the slider here in Animate Timeline just to where the first animation ends, the same happens over here with the other timeline. We can see at 51 frames, this is the end of the first animation, start of the second one. All right, 51 frames. Let's keep that in mind. And now what we can do here is we can actually create different animations. You have the clips animation and animation 1. So what we'll do is I selected the first one here, animation, and we just call this walk start. And we simply clamp it. We end it at 51 frames. You can see end 51, start 0. And we do the same for animation 1. We call this walk cycle and clamp range. We start at 51, we end at 86. And all of a sudden you can see, first of all, 3 green lights here. That's fine. So basically the pose loops perfectly in those 3 dimensions, and it doesn't loop in terms of the moving forward, because obviously through this clip the character actually moves forward, so it will not be in the exact same position where it started out at the beginning of the clip. So that's fine. The start, same thing. Looks good. So that's actually all we need to do here. So we have our 2 clips now, and all we do, we ignore all these stuff down here. You can add events and so on. So you could add events for footsteps synced with the animation and so on, but that's for other tutorials to talk about. And we simply click apply. And all of a sudden you have 2 clips here. So in this file, in the animations 2 FBX, our initial animation clip is split up into walk cycle and walk start. So what we can do now is we can go into our scene, now hierarchy to the character. And I already have a animator controller created. Let's just do that from scratch. Right click, create animator controller. You get the point. And what we do now is we simply drag this one into the animator in the controller slot here for our character. All right, so this is the animation that we can then apply here. So I actually need an animation tab. So let's add the animation tab, and let's also add an animator tab. Move it down here. The default view doesn't come with all of this. All right, so what we can do now is with our character selected, we can, let's move it over here. We can go into our project and we can select our start cycle, our start walk animation, and just drag those in here. For any explanation on the animator, I think that should also be a different tutorial. It's really just what we want to see is what does the animation look like. So now that we have these 2 animations in our animator in here, they will actually show up in our animation pane. Again, with our character selected, we now actually have the choice of walk start, walk cycle, and you can see the animation here in our animation window. And there's quite a lot of things that were animated. And you can see there's also something yellow showing up, which is the hair. Now, I don't think the hair is actually animated. You can see there's only 2 frames at the very beginning. So when looking at this animation, this is not a very efficient way of animating. There's a lot of redundant keyframes here that we probably don't need. So we would actually have to clean this up quite a bit. So it's really a matter of finding high quality animations in DAZ Studio and then exporting them if that's really what you're after. My personal preference is to actually animate in Unity using Scale as a tool, or you just use other external tools like 3ds Max or Maya or Blender or other tools for animations. But it's certainly possible to animate in DAZ Studio. Now let's have a look at our walk animation. It actually looks a little bit cleaner. There's not as many properties that were animated. And again, you can then obviously change things here in Unity as well, so you can tweak things as you like. And now you can play around. Obviously, you would have to set up actually the conditions from going from start to cycle. You could, for that, use some of the standard assets that come with Unity, character controller, and actually just replace the animations with what you have here, with the ones that you imported. So there's other tutorials talking about that as well. But I think you get the basics of just importing animations from DAZ into Unity. And that's how it works. And splitting them up, you can really do the splitting up a single animation into multiple clips with as many clips as you want. All right, that's it for this tutorial. And thanks for watching.